Hello again. Recently, I've been in a phase of my life where everything feels urgent. Like I have so many different projects running at the same time. I'm working full time, but also building creative projects, trying to apply for like all my visa related stuff for my exchange, and everything is happening at the same time. I'm also adding tasks onto my plate. And I guess somewhere between all those things, I started questioning whether I was feeling determined or if I was just scared of staying still and being like stuck in the same place that I'm in right now. Not that I hate that place necessarily, but it just got me thinking about whether what I was feeling was like a determination, a healthy sort of sustainable motivation that I was feeling, or if I was just desperate to be at another point in my life. My name is Alex. I do these kind of like little video essays, I guess, about creativity and culture and how things shape how we work as creatives, and also why the way we work is how we work, trying to figure out myself, my brain, and also sharing this in an attempt to maybe also help you figure yours out. I also publish, this is a new thing, but I publish a digest on my website where I do a small little deep dive into things that I'm seeing in the creative industries. That can be found on my website, and you can also sign up to receive it in your email. And I am also on Instagram, so I guess there's that too. But yeah, I've been thinking about this whole determination versus desperation. And my conclusion is this. I don't think desperation is fuel in the way that it feels. As in, even if it feels like it's fuel and you're really, really set to move through whatever obstacles come your way and get out of this period of time or this context or this and that. Like if you're, I think I'm feeling like this because I'm in my third year of my bachelor's degree, and I'm kind of getting not tired of it, but I'm excited to move on to something new. And I think the drive to move on to something else is so strong in me that I am almost like frustrated, but it feels like motivation and it feels like fuel, but I just don't think it's the right source of motivation because there's no way that feeling can be sustainable. And these are my thoughts about that. I think desperation, or this like really, really strong determination type of feeling that's not determination, is fueled by a desire to escape. And escapism can never be the same as like a source of energy. Escapism is more reactive. And I think I spent a lot of time like thinking about this thing, and you've probably like heard about that in the previous videos. But I think whenever you're reacting to something in your environment or any kind of external thing, that's never going to be the pure thing. Like there's a proactive element in creativity or in doing something with your life that isn't there when you're doing it from a place of reacting to something else. So as much as obviously pushing through obstacles and, being shaped by your challenges in life is important, I also don't think that is what your true self is. I think there's a bigger element of creativity in shaping your life and your identity that comes from actually a moment of peace, and it's just important to find that moment of peace and moment of sort of acceptance to be able to build from that. The other thing is that the expectations that are attached to the feeling of desperation or like this kind of like less healthy, I guess, motivation is that the expectations are attached to the outcome. And for the process of making art or building a project, that's actually a distraction. So whether you're building a startup or writing a book or making music, if your interest lies in the outcome more than it lies in the process of creation, you're actually distracted from the moment of creativity that it's going to take to make that product. And I'm not saying, obviously, I don't think there's anything unhealthy in wanting to have a finished song that you can share to your friends and like all these things. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but if you're so caught up on that final sort of like running a marathon and crossing that finish line, you're distracting yourself from the 3 hours you're going to spend running that marathon. And it's just going to be harder for you to actually push through and get to that finish line if all you're thinking about is the finish line. Again, kind of obvious things, but I think in terms of intrinsic and internal motivation, it's actually not as clear. And actually, I found this kind of diagram that kind of I wanted to sort of figure my way around. So intrinsic motivation is essentially anything that comes internally, so motivation you get from within. And then extrinsic is external motivation, stuff like rewards, whether that's like grades or bonus at work or anything external. The other axis of this diagram is what I haven't seen before, and that's positive engagement and negative engagement. And I'm not sure, because again, I haven't looked at the source of this, but my immediate reaction is that the engagement axis talks about what you're getting the motivation from. So essentially, positive engagement is like, let's say the example of extrinsic motivation for positive engagement is if you do well at your work, the good aspects of your work are going to be reinforced by an external reward like a bonus or I don't know, your name on a wall or something. And then negative intrinsic, let's say, would be you don't go to the gym, like you skip a session at the gym, and internally you punish yourself for that. The punishing aspect, maybe it can be less active, it can be like more passive. You just, I don't know, give yourself negative points for skipping the gym. Same thing extrinsically. Let's say if you point out the kids in the classroom that are doing worse versus that are doing better, if you pay attention to the negative element versus the positive, like I think that's what the engagement axis is about. Like in parenting, I guess it's like if you're spending more time telling your kids off versus if you're rewarding their good behavior. And so I guess this diagram basically says that the negative side just works worse because you're not actually as motivated to do better. You're actually just motivated to avoid the bad experiences. So in terms of motivation, it's obviously not going to push you that far versus obviously reinforcing the good. And then the best is when that reinforcement comes internally, because then you don't need anyone to tell you whether or not what you're doing is good, whether like there's no validation that you're seeking from that. And I think in terms of art, it's super, super important that we try to find as much dopamine and as much validation from that intrinsic positive reinforcement, because only then can we actually be self-fulfilled and therefore autonomous in our creative work, which will inevitably give us more creative freedom, even in our own heads. And that leads me to the fact that you can't get out of your life by hating it. Like, even if your goal is to move to a different context within your lived experience, and like, fair enough, I think for artists, a lot of artists have that. Like, you want to be doing your art full time, and maybe you're in school, or maybe you're working full time, and you can't, quit and pursue your painting career. But the issue is that no matter what your end goal is, you will never be able to get out of your current circumstances by resisting them. Because the avoidance that it takes to like actively be resisting your environment is a form of distraction, but more than that, it's also your energy would go towards the avoidance instead of towards the work that it would take. And this kind of leads to the whole second part where, like, okay, what do you do with all these things, and how do you actually find a sustainable, healthy, and like long-term motivation? But the conclusion of these thoughts was just that the most efficient progress requires working with the cards that you have, And a big part of that is just acceptance. Yeah. And so when we look at the sort of like the positive end of things, the square one that we're looking for, avoiding despair and all of these things, determination kind of comes into more clarity in terms of what it means to be determined versus desperate. If desperation is kind of an active avoidance of your current circumstances, and then the means to that avoidance becomes creative work or, being productive in whatever way, then all of a sudden determination actually becomes more clear as a distinct motivation force, because determination allows you, and I don't think by default it keeps it necessarily, so maybe this is slightly off, but it allows you to keep what's useful and what you can actually play with in your current circumstances instead of starting over from scratch. So instead of running away from your life, running away, escaping whatever you have around yourself, you actually use it. And to put it into a practical example, if you work a 9 to 5, let's say, instead of wishing for a full-time lake house life where you just paint all day, you can actually just doodle in the 15-second smoke break that you get, and kind of integrate the thing that you want into your current circumstances in a way that allows you to slowly transition and therefore build on top of your life versus wish for this whole experience to just go away and you be living somewhere else. And in terms of this, like a big thought that kept on coming back is just the fact that accepting your context is what lets you address it and what lets you actually give yourself a chance to experience life the way you want it. Because if you actually look eye to eye at your experience, you can then already have a clear view in terms of what you like and what you don't like about life. And you can already much quicker start living the life that you want to live simply by integrating elements that you want in your hypothetical ideal escapism life in your current life. And that also gives you a different feeling, which is just peace. And I think somehow, and for whatever reason, I don't actually know the reason, but I feel like a lot of the times that I'm trying to pick my brain in terms of these creative approaches and how to live a creative life, I keep coming back to these images of just like what I guess I visualize as peace. Because I think maybe the reason that we make art, or the reason that we want anything in life, is actually because we want this feeling of peace. And I think that feeling of peace is more of value than more powerful, more active, more energetic happiness. And that feeling of peace is also the only way that you can actually be productive in a way that allows you to move forward and build block by block and get somewhere. Instead of the most fast-paced but anxiety-induced productivity where you're running around, doing a lot of things, being very active, but because of the turbulence in your emotional state, the blocks that you're building aren't actually sitting on top of each other in a stable enough way for you to be able to climb that ladder. And so you just end up with a bunch of little bricks all around you, but not a single foundation. And so you end up feeling stuck in this cycle of life that seemingly leads to nowhere. And if we want progress in whatever way, what we need is momentum, but towards something, which is also the beauty of, like life, that you get to sort of, your life gets to amount to something and, take shape in a way over time. But you can only do that by being as conscious as you can bear of your current life circumstances and experience. Like, that is what it takes to be able to address the worst and the best things in life. And I think, obviously, it's not an easy thing to do, but that's kind of the whole point. It's that it might feel easier to run and do, the whole like running around doing whatever work that fills in the space, because you feel like you're putting in the energy, putting in the effort, you're putting in the work, and it should amount to something, but it doesn't by default. And it's because you're not actually addressing, you're not looking around, you're not, I don't know how to explain it. Like, you could have, I don't know if this actually, it feels like that, the times when you set a cup of tea, you set it up, you're like, okay, I'm going to take a moment to like breathe and like enjoy this cup of tea, whatever. But I have so many things to do. You're running around doing all these things. And by the time you actually get to your cup of tea, it's super cold, like embarrassingly cold, like you forgot about it. And I think there's something deeper in those moments where we, by trying to be productive and by trying to advance in life, we actually end up missing the small, maybe inconsequential elements of good in our daily lives that could actually, like drastically improve our lived experience of whatever time we're spending on Earth. And that to me is kind of the point. Like, you can be running around to build your dream life, but if you're missing the like sunny day today, who's to say that by the time your life or like your, productivity, your work, whatever amounts to what you wanted it to amount to, that you're going to have the skill that it's going to take to enjoy that life. Whether that is, actually enjoying your cup of tea or, like you want to be painting every day, well, you also need to learn to enjoy that process. And I think as much of living life, and especially I think for creative people, but also for anyone, is that, yes, you're supposed to shape your life, you're supposed to work on something because then it gives you a sense of meaning and all these things. But learning to hold it is just as important. Because I came to the conclusion internally that if I was granted whatever reality that I want to be in right now, I would not have a different experience from my life than what I'm having right now. And again, it's a very obvious thing. It's the whole thing of how, like, if your circumstances change, how you are with yourself and what you do with your emotions and your life and what you tell yourself obviously stays the same. Like, that doesn't magically change. But so half of the task of, having a good life is actually just trying to have a good life. And then the other half is building it, Like, there's an active pursuit of it that's required, but you can only get to the active pursuit by meditating and increasing your capacity for a passive enjoyment of tiny elements that you already have. And then you will inevitably, as that spiral grows, you will inevitably have more and more of those experiences. But you almost are building two parallel structures at the same time. One is your life in terms of what it looks like externally or what it actually is, and the other in parallel is what you're able to make of it, like what feelings you're able to get from whatever experiences, regardless of the second advancement. And so that's also where, I guess, like in Buddhism or whatever, you have, people who, or like Stoicism, I guess, as well, but I guess because that's like a more ancient concept, it's harder to imagine. But that's where people can actually let go of external sort of like validation or career advancements or any kind of goals. Let go of this pillar and just focus fully on life enjoyment regardless of what you have. But I think the point to all of this is that you can have it all. And again, it's like, obviously we know these things when we think about billionaires and, you know, like CEOs and people who have it all materially but don't know like what a good friendship is like we know these things. But I think it's harder to see it at a smaller scale of like, your creative project that you want to pursue will only bring you the experiences that you know how to have. So if you can't enjoy a peaceful day under the sun reading a book, who's to say you're going to enjoy the tiny award you're going to get for your best short film? Or, you know, it's not actually going to bring you a new experience. It's going to give you one of the experiences that you've already had. And the kind of like more mental, emotional stretching that you do, the more of a spectrum you're going to have in terms of what experiences, positive or negative, I guess, that things can bring you. And same thing, it's like the same way at the gym, you can, you know, train different muscles. I think you can actually have a wider spectrum of positive emotions that you develop over time. This kind of became a tangent, but let's slowly return to this. So yeah, by being determined, you can actually have a better experience today while also building in a more productive, more sustainable and quicker way, because your little puzzle pieces actually stick together and make a bigger picture. And this relief, or like, we've been talking about peace, and I guess like the peace of acceptance, like once you accept your reality, you're going to get this sense of peace. But also, maybe that feeling is not going to be peace. It's not going to be relief. Maybe that feeling is just going to be static, like nothingness. That's my dog. But regardless, that feeling of whether it's relief or static neutrality of acceptance gives you the space to actually have the focus you need to move forward or to work or to create anything, to focus on doing what you want to be doing and building what you want to be building. And I think that's like an obvious necessity. Like, the reason why a lot of us feel stuck is because our anxiety and our urgency in terms of all this, our desperation, makes us feel like nothing is adding up because we're not actually looking at things. We're not addressing the picture. And so I guess, to me, that was like my main takeaway of this little train of thought. But the conclusion being like the gap between where you are and where you want to be will never go away by working at it, but rather working inside of it and with it almost. Which again, may be meta, but that's what made sense to me. Trying to think if there was anything else that I wanted to have a go at. But I guess that's about it. I was trying to save a few different things. Like, I wanted to read this little PDF. It's about the desperation of writing and how this writer, I guess, who was bad at, who had a hard time writing in college, wrote like a whole approach for writers. I was interested in that, but I didn't get to it. The other thing is that I wanted to look at the negativity bias, which was interesting. Where's this Wikipedia page? Right here. So essentially, it's this whole thing of how if you have the same amount of negative and positive experiences, you're going to be more aware of the negative, just because we have an internal bias that makes us see the negative as taking up more space than the positive, which I guess is like probably a survival instinct. But there's that. Yeah, I don't know. I've been trying to like gather a wider range of sources. This was an interesting one, not at all related. It just came up because of the word. But it says, on today's social media, the only way to counteract the overflow of online content is to put out an overflow of your own. And it talks about how we've been spamming social medias, whether that's like TikTok, Instagram, whatever, LinkedIn, because we're overwhelmed by the amount that we're seeing, that the only thing we can do to cope is to just also put our stuff there too. And it's interesting because I've been seeing a lot of these articles that are sort of like more skeptical or negative even, I feel like, about online presence and all these things. And I do agree that obviously there's like a trend towards more analog, whether that's analog connection or like analog content, as much as, and I feel it internally too, you know, it's like I really want the real life experience. But at the same time, I think that people are being so dark in terms of like posting online and what that means and all these things, and how no one wants to be an influencer anymore. And I think it's true that maybe the influencer status is dying, but people putting things out there and people expressing more of them online, I feel like is actually on such a bright wave right now. I feel like so many people are actually putting more of their heart into things that they're saying online, that as much as there's obviously like a wave of AI content coming, there's now more of a wave of like real, truthful and honest like communication online too. And that's really cool to see. It's almost like the AI slop is what's bringing about the social media art and the like nature of social media that originally more or less was supposed to be there, of like actually communicating and talking to friends online. And I think I've been feeling a lot of that. So I feel like there's I don't know, I've been seeing a lot of cool things online lately, and I think it's true that because of the amount of content it's harder to go into depth, but I've been really trying to go into more depth recently and trying to, you know, read more full articles, actually, you know, look into things and go into like deep dives about things that I'm interested in, instead of just like consuming what algorithms feed to you. And already, first of all, that cleared like my brain fog, but also it allowed me to actually enjoy and like really have a good time online, which I feel like I've almost like never had to this extent. And it's been also very inspiring and has been pushing me to, the digest that I've been doing came from that, from like a positive experience of actually reading things online and then having things to say, to share, to, yeah, like you read a cool article or whatever and you want to share it with friends. To me, no matter how much content you feel like there is online, if you have something to say, please say it, because there isn't enough content at the same time. I don't know how to explain it. Like there isn't enough quality. And I'm not saying quality in the sense of, you know, like there's not enough, you know, great movies. Like, no, there definitely are enough good movies or whatever. But I think there aren't enough artworks or communications or whatever, like pieces of things that are shared that are true. Like I feel like people have been, and it's not people actually, it's companies. Companies have been so focused on the end outcome and the thing that you get from communicating and all of these things, that what we don't have enough of today are stories that are just meant to be stories, films that are just meant to be films, songs that are just meant to be songs, like all these things, like a post that's just meant to be a post, that's not like selling anything, that's not trying to get any kind of like external outcome. And again, those are, I don't think it's necessarily a problem that companies are using these things. I just think companies also need to realize that they need to be delivering value and delivering a good time for people reading their stuff. And I have seen a lot of companies also give their customers or potential customers a good time through like, you know, funny ads or just things that are made with the respect of the people that are gonna consume them, whether that's like a banner on the highway or like a 30-second ad, you know? I think having that kind of like respect is what allows brands to also participate in the cool era of connecting through things online. So yeah, that's all for today, and I'll see you next time.